Hello, everybody. It's Friday, best day of the week. We're back again, Food Safety Fridays. My name's Simon Timpley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network, and today's special guest presenter is Karen Leacock from NSF International. And today we're going to be talking about internal audits. The title of today's webinar is Get the Most Out of Your Internal Audits. We've got a great crowd, about nearly 1,800. So welcome, Karen. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Simon. It's a privilege for me to be joining for this particular presentation, and so happy to see so many are joining from all over. So it may be morning or it may be evening, wherever you are.
Yeah, wherever you are, you're very welcome. BG Rav Kumar, you're here every week from India. Alison from Northern Ireland. Jennifer from Chicago. I'm from Manchester in the UK. Where are you from, Karen?
I actually live in Canada, in Toronto, just a little north of the city. And right now here, we had some flurries last night, actually. So winter is upon us here in Canada, especially in Toronto.
It's a little warmer here, but loads of rain. Anyway, enough of that. Let's play the sponsor ads and we'll be back in a couple of minutes for the presentation. Okay.
Food safety accidents are a real possibility these days, meaning an increased scrutiny and rigorous testing on production and other areas. From farmland to dining tables, each stage of the entire food supply chain is challenged by product safety, quality, and effectiveness. Whether you're a grower, food packer, trader, or hold any important role in the food supply chain, HQTS can help you to ensure quality and safety from the source. Our services include product inspections, safety audits, quality management, and consulting and training. HQTS, your partner in quality.
Okay, I'll be back for the Q&A later, but for now, I'll hand you over to Karen.
Great. Thank you very much, Simon. Hope everyone is hearing me nice and clear. today's topic, getting the most out of your internal audits. And, this is such a timely topic because in my work, both as a trainer and as a consultant, I find that there are many who are not making the most out of this tool, especially when it comes time for your certification audit by a third party. So just to share a little bit about NSF, we are a globally recognized health and public safety company, which we lead in food safety auditing, training, and consulting. And certainly we encourage you to check us out on our website to learn more about the services we offer. Just an overview when we're going to look at internal audits. Audits are an independent and unbiased evaluation of your food safety and quality management program. Internal audits, effective internal audits, should help reduce your third-party certification nonconformances because, of course, internal audits, you are checking yourself first. And this should definitely, if you do an effective internal audit, reduce your third-party certification nonconformances. So internal audits should be viewed as a learning opportunity for you to identify gaps and improve your food safety program. And of course, that means you've got to do those internal audits early enough so that you do have time to address those gaps. Trends in internal audit results indicate improvements or issues. And remember, your goal is to stay audit ready. All right, so let's dive a little bit more. And I'm going to share with you some information from my source here is FMI, and this is for the SQF certification standard. I think I saw in when you were saying hello, there were a few people there at the SQF conference recently in Florida. I also had the privilege to be there as well, so some of this information you may recognize. So back in 2018, there were an average 5.76 nonconformities per audit, of which 98.4% of these were minors. In other words, people were getting a lot of minor nonconformances, and really these should be things that should be captured during your internal audit. Right, so I'm going to start with a little poll question here for you, and looking forward to your responses here for the poll. Right, so why might there be so many nonconformities identified during certification audits? So go ahead and do the poll, and looking forward to see what your answers are.
Can you see the poll in the sidebar, Karen? If you click the poll just below the chat.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, so it's live, so it's taking place, but around 40% in ineffective internal audits, 45% lack of corrective and preventive action, 13 poor internal auditor training, and then 2 no internal audits completed. So it's those 2 that are vying for the most ineffective internal audits and lack of corrective and preventive action.
Right, correct. Absolutely. And thank you all so much for participating in that poll. And yes, you are right on in terms of that, that ineffective internal audits and definitely a lack of corrective and preventive actions are the top issues. And that already tells you where you need to focus your efforts when it comes to internal audits. So let's dive a little deeper then. Just sharing with you some information, and again, from the most recent conference, where the top 5 minor nonconformances as shared by SQFI was around equipment and utensils, the food safety plan, or sometimes referred to as the HACCP plan, food defense, which we know is very important. And interestingly enough, both 3 and 4 was around the food defense plan. And we know a lot of customers are putting a lot of emphasis on that food defense plan. And number 5, records. Right. And we would think after such a long time, records would be something that most companies would have in place. Now let's look at the top 5 major nonconformances. And as you're seeing there on the screen, interesting once again, cleaning and sanitation. All right, followed by pest prevention. But look at number 3, internal audits and inspections. And that tells me that there's still, some more knowledge that needs to be gained around internal audits and inspections and being able to do them properly. And again, we see pest prevention show up twice here for major nonconformances and management responsibility. So let's start by asking the question, how do you know if your internal audit program is robust? And the first thing we want to look at in identifying this is training. And this is something that I see happen quite a bit, is, are your internal auditors trained? Right? There are many, many companies that confuse what sort of training is required. A lot of them are doing it just in-house, and some are going through a lot of turnover with staff, and so they're not having enough properly trained internal auditors. Skills, right? Internal audit requires a certain skill set, and many are not learning those skills, and so that is impacting their internal audits. Calibration. Most companies don't even calibrate their internal auditors, right? They just figure, here, we need an internal audit done. Here's a checklist. Go out there and do it. Well, you want to calibrate all your internal audit team to ensure that they're all following and viewing things through those food safety eyes, right? And many are also confusing inspections for internal audits. And we're going to talk a little bit more further down about inspections. When I go and I'm doing work with different clients, I hear them using these words interchangeably. Or when I teach an internal auditor course, I'm hearing those words again used interchangeably, as many think that facility inspections are the internal audit, and then they end up at their third-party audit and the auditor is asking for the internal audit report, and they don't have the right records, right? And therefore you end up with records being among the top minor nonconformances. So when we talk about calibrating our auditors, I'm going to show you this picture here, and you can go ahead and put it in the chat if you want. What's your rating between 1 to 5 if we were rating how clean, right, this drain is, right? And that's something you want to do with your internal audit team, right? Calibrate them, have various pictures and ask them to rate those pictures and see, how closely aligned are, the rating, right? I mean, just even showing this picture right now between 1 and 5, right? The numbers are coming in quite differently, right? From, 1 being not clean to 5, it's great, right? And so, or some even rating it even outside of the range. And now you see the value of calibrating your internal auditors, right? So thank you all. Those are great responses there. Okay. So when we think about benefits, right, you want your internal audit program to be robust. And if you have a tough internal auditor, that means your program, you're going to have a more robust audit, which will translate into less non-conformances identified in your third-party audit. So there will be no surprises when the third-party auditor shows up. It also translates to better implementation of your food safety program. And one of the things, of course, that we need to have and demonstrate year over year is continuous improvement. All right. So these are some of the benefits to having a tough internal auditor. Second thing we want to focus on here are interviews, right? You want to be able to interview employees, and it's got to be formal. You want your employees to get used to being interviewed, especially if there are critical control points identified in your facility. Right? So when you're doing those interviews, you want to ask yourself, are you using open-ended questions or close-ended questions? Right? These are things to think about. Right? So here are some examples of questions where you can see we start out with a close-ended example, and then we switch them over to open-ended questions. So review your checklist and see, are your questions open-ended, right? Because close-ended questions, you're going to have a yes or no answer. Whereas open-ended questions, it gives an opportunity for the person being interviewed to explain, right? Or to demonstrate by showing you records, right? And it also gives an opportunity to ask additional questions and see really how effective the program is at the facility. So this is one of the key things. Ask open-ended questions during your interviews. Some additional tools for internal audits is doing that vertical trace. And this is something that for those of you who have gone through third-party audits, the GFSI standards, you will see that auditors now are doing what's called a vertical trace. Right? They're following the audit trail and looking to see, are there patterns? Are there gaps when doing that vertical trace? And it's important that you are able to do a vertical trace exercise so that you are better prepared for your third-party audit. So what is a vertical trace? Here is an example, and we're just using an example of film, but it could be any type of food product. If you're part of storage and distribution, you can pick a particular customer's product to do a vertical trace. And what happens here is at receiving, you're picking a raw material, or, picking a raw material spec. And we're looking at the traceability, we're looking at the lot code. And so this is what an auditor will do. They will select a product with a unique lot number and then ask for the manufacturer or your company to produce all the records related to the production of that lot number, right? So including your production sheets, your receiving records for the ingredients, and the packaging being used in the lot, records of if there's any rework from manufacturing, or did you have any overruns added to the product or created by it. So records throughout the entire manufacturing process, all the way to inventory and distribution records. So all the way through to shipping. What this does, it allows the auditor to verify that as the manufacturer, you are documenting the source, the usage, and the distribution of materials and packaging according to your established procedures. So the records must link the unique identifiers of the raw material to the finished product. All right, so that's a vertical trace exercise. And this is something I will encourage all of you to spend some time doing, to get your internal audit team to do those vertical trace exercises. Thirdly, let's look at timelines. Are you performing your internal audits with enough timeline to conduct corrective action? Right? So are you waiting till a week before, or are you doing it a month before? Are you spreading it out throughout the year to give you enough time to be able to conduct the internal audit and do your root cause analysis and come up with your corrective actions? Right? Again, many companies are taking the yearly approach instead of spreading it out. So that's something that you really need to consider. Corrective actions. And that was part of the poll, right? Are you doing a good job following up on corrective actions? So where is the documentation? An auditor is going to want to see that. When you've done your corrective actions and you did your root cause analysis, did you implement immediate action? Did you do a thorough root cause analysis? And did you come up with long-term solution? So for example, if you saw a leak in the roof and it was leaking onto, finished boxes with product inside, what was your immediate action? Did you stop production? Did you move the boxes? Did you put a bucket there? Then did you do your root cause analysis to identify why are we having a leak? Is there issues, externally on our roof? And then did you implement the long-term solutions, right? Did you need to get a company to come in and fix the roof? Did you even look at, are there other parts of our roof that we could also potentially have future issues with leaks, right? So are you really following up on your corrective actions? And then 4, the internal audit report, right? So those who are doing your internal audits, are findings being documented as non-conformances or just an observation? Right? So do they have the proper training to know what is a non-conformance versus what's an observation during your internal audit? How are you communicating those results? Right? Are they being communicated to the department manager for follow-up? Or is the report just being shared with the food safety coordinator? Is the full audit report being presented to senior management during your management review meeting for actions to be taken, right? And this is what a third-party auditor is looking for. Who was designated to follow up on these corrective actions? Was there a defined timeline for those actions to be completed? And are you doing trend analysis? Okay. Are you looking to see what are the issues that keep popping up over and over again? So those are some key things when we think about the internal audit report. Now, let's look at auditing the requirements. Okay. So the checklist. And for a lot of you, you're downloading a checklist. Many of the standards provide a checklist directly on the website, and it's like, great, let's download the checklist. But is that enough, right? Are you reviewing that checklist prior to conducting your internal audit? And are you adding your own specific questions about your facility to that checklist? With your checklist, are you identifying how it's being scored? Are you scoring your internal audit? Are you doing things like saying this is a non-conformance, whether it's a minor, major, or critical? Or are you identifying it either meets the requirements or it does not meet? So how are you really identifying non-conformances? What measure are you using for those non-conformances? There's a lot of great software out there now. And in using that software, again, you have to identify how you're measuring your observations when using the software. Okay, so here are a couple of examples. Okay, say we were looking at food fraud. Okay, and we looking at the requirements for food fraud. Are we just, and we look and it says we've got to have a vulnerability assessment and we've got to have mitigation plans if we identify some vulnerable areas, and you need to do an annual review of your food fraud program and keep detailed records. So in looking at that section, what do you look for when conducting your internal audit of food fraud, right? What evidence would provide compliance for you, right? Are you reviewing things like all incoming raw materials or chemicals and solvents? What about finished product specifications? Is there any potential for food fraud there? So these are the things that you should be considering when you're doing the internal audit there. Another example for you, food defense, because we know all of the customers, right, want you to have a food defense program in place. So again, look at the requirements for food defense, right? Identifying a senior management person responsible for the program. And then reviewing methods for authorized personnel to access key points in your facility, looking at methods to protect sensitive processing points, measures to secure raw materials and packaging, right? So these are all parts of the requirements, but again, ask the question, what do you look for when conducting the internal audit of this particular program? All right. Are you looking to see those measures in place at the company? It could be cameras, it could be locked doors, maybe inventory control, right? When we ask evidence for compliance, evidence of your plan being tested. Is there any evidence of that? How about visitors? Are there any possibility of unescorted visitors or drivers? Who has access to restricted areas in your facility, right? These are things to consider when conducting your internal audit program. So again, a couple of examples looking at the requirements and for you to really think about when doing your internal audit program. Now I'm going to take you to, and this is where you get to actively participate as well, is wanting you to develop your critical eye. Okay, so I'm going to show you next a series of pictures, and I want you to develop your critical internal audit eyes in terms of what do you see? What do you see, and what will you do next? All right, so these are some pictures of some actual non-conformances, and can you identify what the non-conformances are in the pictures, right? And then, yes, this is a cheese making, an artisan cheese factory, and you could see the staff, right, doing various things. Good. I see a lot of good comments there. All right. So if you're making these observations, then you should be asking additional questions during your internal audits, right? The kettle, it appears to be a copper kettle. How is that kettle being cleaned, right? What sort of cleaning chemicals are you using? So you can see these observations will drive additional questions as part of doing your internal audit, right? So some great comments coming from there. I'm going to take you to another picture here, and this is of a warehouse. All right. So when it comes to warehouses, a lot of times, we don't really do a very detailed look at the warehouse. But again, what do you see? What will you do next? What are you looking for in a warehouse? Right? Things like the floors and the racking, right? The ceiling. Okay, right. Is there a mixed product in this warehouse? What about pest control? Okay, good, right. The open skylights. Absolutely. Is there a potential that these may leak? Is there any evidence of puddles on the floor? Right, or staining, like because those are wooden ceilings. Right. Good. Good. You're seeing all those things. So these are the things you want to ask in your internal audit program. What sort of lot tracking are they doing? Right? How about approved supplier and segregation of allergens? Good. What about their wood and pallet control program? Right. Excellent. Right. What's in the containers? Very good. Right. You're all doing a great job there. Good auditor eyes. All right, I'm moving on to another picture. So just giving you a nice little cross section of various types of operations and, you know, uh, observations that we would want to make during our internal audit. Right. So here we can see a sanitation activity going on. And if you were doing your internal audit and observing this sanitation activity, what do you see? Right. And what are you focusing on as you're observing this? Very good, right? Chemicals, are they labeled? Cleaning procedures, right? Concentration, good. Equipment on the floor, right? Right, the color coded hats, right? We're seeing three different colors, right? What is the significance of the colors when we look at the hats that they're wearing? Right, excellent work there. All right, so then I think I have just maybe one or two more pictures for you. Again, these are all various things that you may come across. And how deep a dive are you making when you do your observations? Okay. Okay, so you can see that close up there, and all right, some issues there, maybe some maintenance issues as well, uh, maybe some temporary repairs also. Right, so we want to have some good follow-up questions because there is the potential for pathogens to be growing based on these observations. Okay, very good. All right, and one last picture for you, right? So that this is developing your critical eye, right? And hopefully, with all these pictures, uh, this is a great way to also train your internal auditors. Take pictures, take before and after pictures. They're a great resource in doing calibration exercises and training as well. Okay. All right, great answers coming in there. Right, we see some temporary fixes. We certainly see areas where the potential for product residue to build up and for pathogen growth to happen. Okay, good stuff, everyone. All right, so now let's turn our attention to self-inspections. Okay. And this is a requirement in GFSI standards. So, what is the difference between an inspection versus an audit? All right. Because many are getting these mixed up, right? With inspections, they also use a checklist, just like an internal audit. Inspections include walking the floor and documenting observations, just like an internal audit. However, inspections should be conducted more frequently, right? And your food safety program should be identifying how frequently you're doing inspections. Is it monthly? Or based on your risk assessment, right? So with inspections, you're doing a monitoring activity. Now, the difference is inspections do not involve a review of all your procedures and policies, all right? Whereas an internal audit, you are required to review the procedures and policies along with your observations and your inspections. And your record. So inspections is like a point or a moment in time. All right, so let's look at some tips when we're talking about inspections. Okay, inspections could be conducted by one person or by a team. and similarly with audits. You also should be training your team that are conducting inspections. Don't just assume because you give them a checklist, they know what to do, right? So train the team conducting inspections. Create an inspection schedule, just like you do an internal audit schedule, and make sure you're following the schedule. This is also something that I see a lot of companies aren't doing. They're not following the schedule. Too many things are occupying their time. And then all of a sudden, it's time for your third party audit, and we have not completed all the inspections as we should. Have a current checklist. Do you review your inspection checklist and update it as needed? Right? Then complete a detailed plant inspection to assess your readiness. And I always encourage, take pictures, right? Take pictures, have good notes. This is so important when you're doing inspections. Report your inspection results to your food safety coordinator or whoever is the designated manager for prompt action to take place. It may need input from maintenance or quality or a supervisor, right? Make sure those results get to them in a timely manner. Trends in inspections will indicate either improvements are being made or that you still have ongoing issues. Right? So very important to do the trending. Again, your goal is no surprises during your third party audits, right? No surprises. And remember, corrective actions are required whether we're doing an internal audit or we're doing a facility inspection. All right, so now let's move on to looking at how can we manage our program. Right? So when it comes to managing your internal audit program, remember, ensure all your team members are properly trained, whether it's for audits or inspections. Have that detailed, up-to-date checklist based on either the most current version of the standard or your updated policies and procedures. Right? Clearly document all your findings, whether they are in compliance or not. And this is a point I want to make, that many times with internal audits, the team is just focusing on finding the non-conformances. But you also want to document all the things that are also in compliance, right? We want to share the good as well as the things that are not so great in our facility, and take pictures. They're a really good way to be able to share with those who are going to be responsible for corrective actions. Take pictures. That's really, really important. Some other tips for managing your program: interview your employees. Get them comfortable with being interviewed during an audit or an inspection. Review records so they are thorough. Remember, records are among the top non-conformities identified during third-party audits. So make sure those records are up to date. Conduct the vertical trace exercise. So after this presentation, put that on your to-do list. Conduct that trace exercise on a specific product or lot number, because all the current GFSI audits include this. Your third-party auditor is going to conduct an exercise at your facility. Ensure you're doing root cause analysis. You're coming up with corrective and preventive actions. They're being understood and they're being completed. And then that final point, do not forget verification of corrective actions. This is something I see whether it's from an internal audit, an inspection, and even from third-party audits. You're sending in your corrective actions online, but you're not doing the verification as to whether those corrective actions are effective, right? And that's the thing you want to ensure, right? So these are the tips I want to share with you when it comes to your internal audit program. And I hope that you've got some good takeaways here. Now, thank you all so much for participating with the presentation and all of your comments. I know we've got lots of questions, and so at this time, I know Simon has been monitoring the chat, and we're going to have a look at your questions.
Yeah, yeah. Let's lose the slides. Brilliant. Yeah, I enjoy it when there's audience participation. It makes it much more engaging, definitely, for everybody. And cements the learning, which is important as well, definitely. So yeah, let's get some questions. Question from Brooke. Would vertical trace exercises be conducted differently than a recall traceability exercise?
All right, that's a great question, Brooke. Yes, it is, because with a recall trace exercise, like there are some similarities in there, but with the recall, usually we are looking at maybe one product and are following it, whether it's from the customer sending you the lot number and then you're tracing it backwards to the supplier, or you're also tracing it forward to the customer, whereas with a vertical trace, you are picking a product and you're looking at all the inputs. So you're starting at the point of receiving, again, there's a lot of similarities. However, you're following it with all of the tracking. So in terms of the information for the lot number, the spec sheets, the receiving records, if there's been any overruns as well, any rework, you're looking at your inventory, you're looking at your distribution records, you're looking at usage. You're looking at the packaging as well, and any other unique identifiers. So a lot of similarities, but you're doing a little bit more of a deeper dive.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Question from Rodrigo. Is inspection related only to PRPs?
Okay, good question. Yes, usually with our inspections, we're only looking at the PRPs, we're looking at the GMPs, whereas internal audits is the entire program, including management commitment.
Okay. Should inspections be unannounced?
Good question. Usually our inspections are announced, but certainly you could do some unannounced, and that would be a great way of seeing how robust, right? Because you want to stay audit ready. So yeah, do some unannounced ones.
Alan, how do we record trends in inspection?
Okay, so look at all of your inspection records, all your inspection reports, and track the trends, right? Are you having repeats? One way to do that, even with inspections, is include a column on your checklist for repeat. Is there a repeat observation? And then you pull that out, and that's your trends. Yep.
Okay, question from Brooke. Would vertical trace exercises?
So we did that one. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we've done that one. Apologies.
Okay.
Angela. Where can I find a good self-audit checklist? Small manufacturer co-packer in the US.
Okay, so Angela, I don't know if you are doing certification to any of the GFSI standards, but SQF has a checklist on their website. BRCGS has a checklist on their website as well. And I know a lot of people are using things like iAuditor or SharePoint, but I know those GFSI standards have checklists.
Okay, question from Stitchin. What are the best practices for verification of corrective and preventive action?
All right, great question. So when it comes to verification, it depends on what the issue is, right? So if the issue is around production and you want to look at the next run of that particular lot number, and that's the best time to verify, is the corrective actions effective? If you're going to do training, and it involves retraining of staff, then go out there and do some observations, right? Or ask them to train you back, to explain back to you what they've learned, right? So those are good ways to do verification. Observations, interviewing staff, having them train you back, and whenever the product gets run again, look to see, did our corrective actions actually work? So, saying we're going to do it the next day, sometimes you need to do verification several times to see, is it really effective?
Great. Question from Jana. How important is it to have pictures being taken with company's camera versus your private phone?
Okay, well, Jana, Jana, you're going to have to look at your company policy on that. Again, as you could see in the presentation, pictures are an excellent tool. So when you're doing your internal audits, you just make your company aware of that, take those pictures, upload it, include it with the report, but follow your company policy. We don't want you to get in trouble.
No. Edwin, how do we calibrate auditors?
All right, so how would we calibrate auditors? Have them audit the same area, but separately, and see what the documented non-conformances are. Right? So look at those audit reports. If you have maybe 3 or 4 auditors, have each of them go out, audit the exact same area, and then come back and look at their results and do a comparison, or again, use pictures and have people rate the pictures like we did at the first part of the presentation.
Okay.
These are great questions, Simon.
Lots of questions as well. You do brilliant. BG Ravikumar, is internal audit criteria done covering all the clauses of the requirements?
All right, so with internal audit requirements, based on the standard, you must do an internal audit of all the requirements in the standard, and that would include equipment. Yes, it has to cover everything. From senior management commitment right through to all your prerequisite programs. Yep.
Okay. I can see another question about auditor competence as well, and how often should you evaluate the competency of auditors?
Well, you can follow what third-party auditor companies do. They do auditor calibrations at minimum annually. So you can do the same, especially if it's the same internal audit team, at least once a year, do that calibration exercise. If you see there's issues, then bump it up to every 6 months.
Yeah. Question from Carlito. How often should we conduct internal audits?
In all of the standards, you'll see at minimum, you must do it annually. Now, depending on the standard, some will allow you to do it once for the year. Other standards like BRCGS requires you to spread out the internal audit throughout the year at a minimum of 4 times. So follow your standard requirement.
Okay. Julia, do you recommend using a scale for internal audit scoring rather than a conformance or non-conformance format?
Scales sometimes are left to self-interpretation, so I would stay away from a scale and be very specific. Is it a minor, a major, or critical, and define what those mean? And if you want to use the same definitions as your standard, that would be good. Or you define, is it a conformance or a non-conformance? But be very specific. Otherwise, you're going to be left to too much interpretation.
Okay, question from Kayla. Can regular verifications, routine inspections, replace the need to include the program in the internal audit schedule, i.e. annual test of the food defense plan?
Unfortunately, no. The standards will say that you have to do an annual test of your food defense plan. And then when you do the internal audit, you're actually checking, did that test occur? Do you have documentation that you did review it? So no, they're two different things. Yeah.
Carly, so what's the ideal number of members for an internal audit team?
Sorry, Carlito, it depends on your facility, the size of your facility. For very small companies, sometimes it's best to use a third party, right, to have an external set of eyes. If you're part of a corporate entity, I encourage, switching your internal audit team. So I would go and do the internal audit at Simon's facility, and Simon's team would come and do it at my facility. So you have a fresh set of eyes. But there's no real ideal number. It all depends on the size of your facility.
Okay. The difference between, it's from Stygian, difference between a non-conformity and an observation.
All right. And you will see the standards have actually gotten away from observations. So a non-conformance is where you're identifying a food safety issue. So something that can make a consumer potentially sick or seriously harm them. An observation might be as you're looking at records and you see, one area where there isn't a signature. You've looked at maybe 10, 15 records, and yet one doesn't have a signature. That might be an observation because you can see that the program is pretty robust.
Okay, from Bala, is there any difference between a non-compliance and a non-conformity?
Wording. Wording, right? You define what that is.
Ryan is asking, again, what's the difference between inspection based on risk assessment and risk-based audit?
All right. So, Ryan, hopefully the presentation helped you to see the difference between an inspection versus an audit. Now, when you see that word risk-based in terms of audits and internal audits, what they're asking you to do is your schedule for conducting the internal audits. You should do a risk assessment to identify, are there certain parts of your program that you may need to do an internal audit more frequently. So for example, if you're having issues with personnel practices, instead of doing it once a year, you might want to do an internal audit on that program, let's say twice a year, because the risk is greater.
Okay. Question from Francis. I see audit as a way of checking that processes transfer information correctly. The vertical trace would do that too?
Correct.
Okay. Long question from Victor. Hi, SGF now requires proficiency testing for environmental inputs done at the facility. What do you look at when inspecting this? What in specific needs to be in place for a facility doing entro with no more than a small warmer?
Wow, that's a pretty specific question. I'm not sure I can answer the second part of the question, but in terms of proficiency testing, what that's about is that if you have multiple individuals conducting, say, maybe some quality tests, they're doing maybe swab testing, they're doing maybe flavor profile testing. A proficiency test is ensuring that all the individuals can accurately identify what it is they're looking at. So if we were doing a flavor profile, can we both identify sour versus sweet versus salty? If we're doing a quality test, are all the individuals conducting the quality tests in the same way? So proficiency testing is very important, and that's why SQF now has that in the standard to ensure that everyone is, it's like doing a calibration, really.
Okay, thank you. Question from Santosh. Difference between product recall, traceability, and products withdrawal?
Wow, I think that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave that one.
Yes, somebody else will do a presentation on that.
Julio, right. This is on topic, I think. Julio, what if there are disagreements amongst the auditors about the rating certain non-conformance? What is the general guidelines for this or a follow-up?
All right, great question, Julio. This is why you have to have a lead auditor. So once you have a team of auditors, your lead auditor, I would definitely encourage you that the lead auditor takes an internal audit course so that they have a really good knowledge base and they're the ones giving direction as to how to rate your internal audit checklist. So ultimately, if there's discrepancies, the lead auditor makes the final decision.
Okay, another question from Julio. Would you recommend outsourcing the internal audit for the means of maintaining objectivity of the findings and perhaps increase effectiveness?
Absolutely. Whether you're a small facility or a medium to large size facility, it is a really good thing to outsource it. You can have a consultant come in and conduct that for you, and it really gives you a good, a different set of eyes looking at your facility, and definitely increase effectiveness, or also doing it as unannounced. That would also make a big difference.
Okay,
Yep.
we're getting there. Question from Earl. What is the sample size for the amount of documents / records reviewed?
Good question there. Depends on the section you're looking at. I mean, certainly if you're looking at sanitation program, I'd want to look at, maybe 3 to 4 months of records, because that will usually give you an idea if there's trends, right? If there's issues. So some of your programs like sanitation or maybe personnel training, you want to look at more records, especially if there may be temps, right? If the facility is using temps, look at a bigger size, right?
Question from Tavia. Any tips or advice on interpreting the requirements for clauses specific to your organization?
Oh, wow. So interpretations, again, if you're using any of the GFSI standards, they do provide interpretation guidance documents. So I would tell you that's your good first resource. SQF does it, BRCGS does it. Several of the other standards provide an interpretation guideline for the clauses.
Okay. Cassie was just asking, when you say annually, is that once every 12 months or once between January? Yeah,
it's once every 12 months, whatever your cycle. So some might be January to December. Others, if your audit is happening, say June, then your cycle might be June to, May of the following year. Yeah.
Okay. Santosh, what is the shelf life of internal audit evidence or documents?
Okay, that's going to be part of your document control and records procedure. Whatever you have put in that procedure, it's the same for internal audit records.
Okay. Right then. We're done.
There was lots of questions
Brilliant.
there,
Oh,
lots of
amazing.
really
There's some
good
really good
questions.
questions there as well. So excellent,
Yes.
excellent presentation and loads of questions answered really well. So very
Thank you.
informative and extremely helpful and timely, Earl said.
Thank
So
you, Earl.
lots
Thank
of
you.
thank yous in the sidebar. So we do follow up afterwards, send the recording, the slides and certificate to everybody. So thanks for joining today. And thanks very much, Karen. We're going to be starting out with webinars for next year, so hopefully you'll be on one in 2023. So
Well, thank you,
nice to see you
Simon.
again.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was really a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, so much. And then wishing you all the best with using the information to get the most out of your internal audit programs.
Super. Thanks, Karen. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
weekend.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Okay, I'll load your certificate in the sidebar. We do send it again with the follow-up email. So in an hour or two, we'll send you an email with the certificate, slides, recording. And yeah, so thanks for your attendance today. We've had a real great webinar, well over 400 people online. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a lovely weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Take care. Bye.